Well, welcome everyone. My name is Michael LeBlanc. I'm host and the producer of Moya Financial Matters. We're here at the Moya Financial main branch on Brown's Line in Toronto, and we're here to talk about fraud, preventing fraud, understanding fraud and what it takes and its impact on you. And hopefully at the end of this session, you'll learn a little more about the very common issues and causes, and maybe a way to help protect yourself against the very types of common fraud that you may come across. And perhaps you've already experienced some and have some knocked on the door or received some funny, strange emails or whatever. To help me explain that, we've brought in my good friend Stephen O'Keefe, who is a colleague of mine from the retail industry, a veteran loss prevention, as we call it in the industry, expert, and an expert in such matters. Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. It's great being here.
Well, you and I have known each other for many years, actually. We've actually worked together. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, a veteran. I guess that means I'm old of the of the retail industry. So I was working in loss prevention for Hudson's Bay and Sears back in the day, and also was the vice president of loss prevention and risk management with Walmart Canada. And in that capacity, I was able to do some things internationally. So I was able to see, and experience some of the things that happened in other countries and bring those best practices back and share information. Now I am consulting. I am president of Bottom Line Matters. So it's kind of twofold. My company consults with retailers to offer them guidance in terms of doing a risk assessment, a gap analysis, and then preparing a process improvement roadmap for them when some of the loss exposure issues are identified.
Right.
And then on the other side, I work with vendors who are in the space of offering solutions, loss prevention and security solutions to retailers, and I bridge the gap between basically what they have produced and the needs operationally from a retail standpoint. And so I marry the two entities up.
Right.
I also represent the retail industry on the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. We have, I'm an associate member, and we have a private sector liaison committee. That committee bridges the gap between policing and the private sector retailers. And part of my mandate is to really highlight and heighten the awareness of the fraud issues that are taking place primarily in retail, but where retail is used as a tool to execute the offense.
Yeah, interesting. And so both of our backgrounds have a lot to do with business to business, so to speak, helping retailers. But in order to help retailers, and this is why I thought of you when we were talking at Moya about, who could we get on to help explain to the people common fraud and how to prevent it. You need to see it from both sides, right? Because often, as you say, retailers, retailers have to struggle with their own issues, but sometimes, customers are coming in asking for tens of thousands of dollars of gift cards because they've been scammed. So why I thought you'd be perfect for today is just to help us understand all these things. And it's a career understanding fraud and crime. So listen, let's jump right in. When we think about personal fraud and personal crime, it's really one of those things that is not, the idea that it's someone in their basement, an individual kind of trying to trick people, that's probably not quite the case. It's a little bit more organized than that, would you say?
Yeah, it's a business. So there is an element of, maybe somebody who wants to explore the possibilities and defraud somebody in their basement. But that's few and far between. What we're talking about is people who make a living out of this. And the interesting thing during COVID-19 timeframe is while a lot of people struggled to work, the fraudsters had access to e-commerce, mobile devices, phones.
And everyone was home, right?
And everybody was home. And so, yeah, there were a lot of scams. I mean, so in Canada, the attempts at fraud increased last year by 140%.
Wow.
The
So 140% increase of attempted fraud on people like who are sitting
on
watching
everybody.
us today.
So,
Wow.
so these frauds, the way that they're reported, is both reported by the consumer as well as by the retailer or the commercial entity,
institution like
in
Moya
a financial
yeah.
institution. Yes, because they're all victims, and so once you have a commission of a fraud, the victim and the reporting, even though they can segregate that afterwards, but all three entities are still victims.
Right.
The unfortunate part of financial institutions and commercial environments like retail is that the transaction that is taking place very often involves the individual.
Right.
So whether your credit card is compromised as a result of somebody who was able to infiltrate a retail setting, it all has to do with a person being the victim.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, let's talk about people for a while, because this is a very common occurrence, unfortunately, and I guess there's a bit of reluctance or even shame in admitting that you've been defrauded. I mean, talk about that for a bit, because it is part of what we wanted to talk about here today, that it's, whether it's email or phone or text or at the doorstep or wherever, it's unfortunately common. So it's nothing to be ashamed of, in other words, and it's something to be both, take that, what do the carpenters say, measure twice, cut once kind of approach. So talk about that, the psychology of defrauding, of being defrauded.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that we've had in the industry. So for those who are, fraud fighters or crime fighters, is this notion of reporting. And it does come, as you say, with this element of embarrassment if you've been scammed and you have entrusted your information with an unknown person because they were able to, create this confidence. So a con person, a con man, is a confidence man. It's somebody
gaining your
who will
confidence.
gain your confidence, exactly, in order to get a little bit of information, and it's like baby steps that they get this information. So that element of embarrassment creates this phenomenon of not reporting.
Right.
And
even being drawn in a little further, because maybe you're a bit embarrassed to even admit that maybe you've been tricked once or twice, even in the same kind of process, right? Even in the same defraudment. Let's talk about the number of ways now. We talked about the COVID era. We're all at home. Many more of us are online. There's a lot of different ways that fraudsters can get your information, and it's going to kind of lead into a discussion around, we'll talk about identity theft. But whether it's social media or other ways, there's a lot of little ways that you can, or that fraudsters can get little pieces of information about you. Talk about that for a little bit.
yeah, and it's happened a lot more in recent years, and one of the reasons for that is because financial institutions and credit grantors have had regulatory guidelines imposed on them. So whether you are masking credit card information or hashing or encrypting credit information, it made it a little bit more difficult for the fraudsters to get the information that way, and so they do prey on the individual if they're not able to.
So they can't go after the institution. So
correct.
I always think of fraudsters like water. They always try to find the least path of resistance.
And
right?
that's exactly what's happening. So a little bit here and there, and you test the waters, as you use your analogy.
Yeah.
You test the waters in order to get a little bit of information.
And that could be on maybe social media, right? Or that could be,
Yes.
I was even reading an article about obituaries. Shockingly, it's not uncommon that when someone passes that you'd say, you'd almost give out your whole family tree. The sons, the daughters, the grandkids. And right there's a little bit of information, right? There's actually a lot of information. We'll get to how that can kind of directly result. But those are the kind of little things that fraudsters are, that's their profession, right? They're professional at finding this information and committing crimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have privacy laws in Canada that protect businesses from mishandling personal information. just as the credit grantors are imposing regulations and the government imposes regulations in order to keep financial institutions secure with your credit information.
Privacy laws, digital
Personal
privacy
information is covered through the privacy laws, exactly. But there's still a lot of people that go through dumpsters or shredding bins or recycling bins,
like
pre-shredding.
Like even at the curbside.
Curbside,
kind of
absolutely, to get a little bit of information.
Yeah, I guess, and we're gonna what we're gonna do next. We're gonna jump into a bunch of different types of fraud, which kind of we'll just illustrate and we'll talk about them. But it's kind of some basic principles just at the beginning, and I think we'll come back to them. Is be careful the information you share, even in the most innocent of ways. Whether it's something as simple as what's at your curbside and your recycling. Invest in a shredder. It's not a bad idea, right? Because you may think it's just a little bit of information, but it's enough to kind of, as you said, the confidence, get a little bit of confidence. I know a little bit about you to get a little bit more.
Right.
What you share on social media, who you allow to access on your social media. And then, I don't know how common it is, but I do worry about the obituary, kind of these postings that basically reveal your entire family tree. It's kind of sad, but you also have to be a little bit guarded about that and those kind of things as well. Listen, let's jump right in. The one thing, and we're going to go kind of rapid fire through a bunch of these and give us some tips and thoughts on each. I want to start with identity theft. And to me, identity theft is one of the most important things to understand because it can, if you get defrauded out of a little bit of money or it's a one-time thing, but identity theft can go on and on. So what are the ways to protect yourself against identity theft that you'd want to tell the people about?
Well, I mean, the garbage and the shredding is an important factor because credit card information on statements, your utility bills, all of this information can build up in a fraudster's portfolio, can build up all of the necessary information that they need in order to represent themselves as you for a mortgage, for a car loan,
credit card, or
for
whatever.
a credit card.
So that's where they take on your identity.
Correct.
Right? I've always thought it's one of the great things about like a credit union like Moya Financial is because we like to say you're more than just a number. We know you by name. So by virtue, it's a lot harder actually to do identity theft. But in the big financial institutions, it can get a bit lost, right? You can get a bit lost, and as you say, identity theft is the risk. Is people pretend they're you and they get a mortgage, they get a loan, and you don't even. Would you recommend people subscribing to or investigating services that give them credit alerts and these things? Does that work, do you think, in that scenario?
I would. I did it on myself, actually, and found that there was a lot of information on my credit bureau that was not related to me. And while it wasn't detrimental to me, the individual, at some point over the last few decades, somebody attempted to secure something in my name.
Oh,
and there could be mistakes too, right? So it could be another Stephen O'Keefe with a different date of birth, and the company just had the wrong information.
Right?
It could be a mistake.
Right. If you go to New Brunswick, Michael LeBlanc, there's about 1,000 Michael LeBlancs.
There you go.
And so it happens all the time.
Yes.
Those other pieces of information. All right, let's move on to the next one. Sometimes people are contacted, and again, this could happen email, phone, text, or whatever, by financial institutions purporting to say, hey, I'm X financial institution. We're just trying to verify your information. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that is a scam. People think that their expired credit card, as an example, it has no value because it's expired. So if somebody finds it in the garbage, they won't be able to use it anyway. But what a fraudster will do is take that information and then they will, again, maybe go through your garbage or see what kind of utilities that you have. And they know that in Halton, you only use one electrical company. And so they represent themselves as the electrical company and say, you have a pre-authorized payment that's on this credit card, but it's expired. I
It didn't
need
go
the
through.
new information.
Could
right?
you validate your
Right.
number with me?
And then they get your new security code off the back, and then they get your new expiry date and all kinds of information from that. And so one common denominator that everybody should remember is fraudsters are trying to gain your confidence. They're trying to establish themselves as somebody other than who they are, the fraudster.
Sure.
And so they're trying to gain your confidence, and the bottom line in a lot of this is trust but verify.
Right. So that's a great point. Let's follow up on that. In other words, if a financial institution calls you, or anyone calls you, and you're suspicious, which you kind of should be. I mean, that's kind of our advice today is, don't be paranoid, but be a bit suspicious. Call them back, right?
Absolutely.
So if it's an electricity company, give me your number, I'll call you back, or just go on the internet and call them. You'll typically get like a case number or some reference number.
That's right.
So ask for a case number or reference number. All right, let's move on to this one. And this, you and I experienced this as retailers because people would come rushing in and wanting to buy gift cards. It's the trouble with, I call it the trouble with the family scam, right? You'll get a call saying, hey, your grandchild Sue is in trouble, she's traveling, and you need to bail her out, or some kind of variation of that. So I know you've experienced that. Any advice around, I guess the basic advice is trust but verify, but talk a little bit about that kind of trouble with the family scam.
Yeah, and a lot of this information comes from social media networks. And I don't want to call out any individual one. That's not what we're here for. So, yeah. But there are social media platforms that people share a lot of information about their family, and so I might have, and I do have, a brother-in-law who is living in New Zealand. Now, it would be easy for you to go to my social media network if I had it open to the public and know that, because the photos and the communication is all posted about from my brother-in-law about his journeys through New Zealand. And so for me to get a phone call out of the blue and say, hey, Robert is having problems in New Zealand, I'm right away going to think that's true because they have too much information already. And that's where these calls are generated from, right, is information collected through social media.
And that much of information, right away you're already thinking this could be true.
Right.
Right? It's just enough to say, that's right, I do have a brother-in-law or brother, or my grandchild is traveling Europe.
Yeah.
Oh, this could be real. And they start to kind of reel you in.
Yeah,
right?
and they're professionals. Fraudsters have a tone that is calm and comfortable and comforting. I mean, of course,
helpful.
You get some of the calls that come from overseas, and that this is a call center, and
you can hear some buzz behind them.
There's buzzing, and there's other people in the background saying, "Yeah, your prince relative passed away, and he had 28 million US. Just wire transfer us 2,700 to start your account."
We're going to get to that one, also known as the Nigerian prince scam.
Right.
Before we get to that one, you spoke about professionals and sounding like authorities. A very common scam. I get these calls like once a week that I'm about to be arrested. If I was actually arrested the number of times someone left me a voicemail saying I'm about to be arrested by Revenue Canada, I wouldn't be here with us today. Very common, right?
Right. Revenue Canada or the Canadian Border Services, because a lot of times and fraudsters again know this, if you get a call from an authority, whether it's CRA, Canadian Revenue Agency, or Canadian Border Services, there's this feeling of panic, even though you didn't do anything. It's like when you're driving 100 kilometers an hour on the 401 and you see a cop on the side of the road, you hit your brake and you slow down, and your adrenaline just starts flowing. Yeah. Fraudsters know that, and so they take advantage of the fact that I'm going to represent myself as an authority figure, someone they're going to be intimidated by to the degree that they give me information.
Right.
And you go back to trust but verify, because if they are a legitimate organization, they won't be offended if you say, you know what, I'll call you back.
Yeah, give me a case number. Speaking of legitimate organizations, I got a call from Microsoft last week saying I had a computer virus. Now, as it happens, I'm an Apple alone household, so I know we have no Microsoft devices. But that's a common one too, right? Hi, it's Microsoft calling, not to pick on Microsoft, it could be anyone. There's a virus on your computer, and they will actually go on with you on the computer and steal your money, right? So talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, again, they try to set that panic into where I'm being helpful and you need me. And so you have to give me a little bit of information in order for me to help you. And a lot of times when they put that fear in your mind,
Oh no, I've got a virus on the computer, I
you're
didn't
not
know.
thinking straight. You're thinking, you know, this is someone who's going to bail me out. And meanwhile, there are fraudsters trying to get information, not trying to bail you out at all.
So there's another one, and I guess some of these are variations on theme. I call it the transaction denied email or text. I get these like once a week from a Netflix saying, hey, we tried to process your credit card. You know, many people are on subscription services, right, that just kind of renew. And they kind of reach out and go, hey, click this link and update your credit information. You already talked about an identity theft. That must be more and more common now with all these like streaming services and subscription services, even down to the newspaper, right?
It is. The unfortunate part of the online fraud stuff, the things that you get through email, is that the fraudsters can create these bots, these robotic ways of targeting you.
Looks very real, right? They look very real.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And 10,000 other people within the same 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And if they get one person to give them information, it becomes lucrative. So when you're talking to some of the cybersecurity experts for some companies, they will tell you that the amount of times that somebody attempts to infiltrate their system is tens of thousands of times per day.
Wow.
And they're bots.
Yeah.
They're people who will take a lot of time to create a program that they can then sit back and wait
Just
because
let
the
it turn.
program
Right.
then connects with
So the economics work. As you said, this is a business.
Absolutely. It's a
organized
business.
crime. It's a business.
That's right.
I'm going to spend $1 million creating a sophisticated fraud software program, but then just let it run and run and run and run, right?
Yeah,
So it's not a human.
and I can go to sleep and wake up in the morning, and if I get 5 hits, I start my day.
Yeah.
That's how they work.
Let's talk about, it's known, and it's been around a long time, the Nigerian prince scam. There's variations of it. It's basically kind of tapping into a little bit of our greed, I think. And I always think if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is kind of one of my defenses. But typically it's someone who'd say, listen, I've got a bunch of money tied up. If you give me a little bit of money, I can free up all this money and share it with you. Talk about that. It's a kind of a classic, been around for a long time scam, right?
And you're right. It is preying on people's emotions, the greed, one in this case, the fear of missing out. In
FOMO,
this case,
as the
FOMO
kids say.
is related to money and the greed piece. And so you're going to think, just like gambling, that there might be a chance.
It sounds legit.
And some people, to this day, continue to send money to these scammers who represent themselves as Nigerian law firm, and not picking on the country. Just the
started there.
Majority of them are coming and still continue to come in from Nigeria, even though the Nigerian police agencies have cracked down.
Yeah.
And they have caught a lot of people doing it. You know, there's one person on social media who used to promote all of the cars that he had, and he was actually one of these fraudsters who was a billionaire.
Wow. There's a lot of money involved. Let's talk about, speaking of the internet and computers, let's talk about internet viruses and ransomware. So I guess in this circumstance, you might get an email that includes a link. Maybe for some reason they bait you. What do they call it? Phishing, right? They bait you into clicking on that link, and a couple of bad things can happen from that. So let's talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, so viruses, the ones that you know and you see, are pretty bad. The ones that are running in the background, this malware that you don't see and you don't know, are terrible because they are pulling information. And a lot of my clients are commercial clients, and so they are trying not to get the information from the commercial entity, but the information from the people who do transactions with them, the individuals. And so if it is a retail business, they're trying to get the consumers'
Right.
information to defraud them.
And that could be like a keystroke tracker, right? You don't even know it's on your computer,
Yeah.
but yet it's tracking every keystroke, right?
That's right. And so those are the viruses that are deadly because they continue to run, and they continue to extract information or money in some cases. And the victim is not in control in some cases of the means of how the fraudster is getting the information.
Like they don't know. I don't
They
understand.
they just don't know.
Don't even know.
Right.
I guess so. What's the how do you protect yourself? I guess the basic is don't click on links in emails from people you don't know. And you know the services, whether you're on a Rogers or a TELUS or a Shaw or a Gmail, if you're getting 1 or 2 spam emails, they're getting 1 or 2 million spam emails. But
Yeah.
again, if the email, and boy, they work hard to make those emails look real, right? Some are outrageous and you know they're fake, but some look really real, right? Like they can even spoof an email address that makes it look like someone you know, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, like if you go to a hotel lobby, it's easy for somebody to, and again, you trust. So if I went to the Marriott and went to the lobby and it said free Marriott Wi-Fi, click, and then there's no password on that, and I click on that and I start to use what I think is their Wi-Fi, it's actually somebody with a machine sitting in the lobby who is actually cloning everything that I'm seeing and everything I'm doing. So we had a conference about 5 years ago where we had a cybersecurity expert at the conference, and he did just that. And he called out, there were hundreds of people in the room, he called out a certain person who was looking at their home. So they had connection to their home, and they were either doing their thermostat or they were looking at their fridge information, but they had clicked on the Wi-Fi, and he brought it up on screen and said, take a look at this.
Oh my goodness.
And all of the person's info, so they were in the room
And that's
doing it at the
that's
time.
at a security conference, right?
At a security
So
conference.
this is with security professionals who live this every day, can still be tricked.
Absolutely.
Can still fall for these things.
And again, because you're trusting it, says Marriott Wi-Fi, click here, no password, and he had set it up and he called himself Marriott Wi-Fi.
And I guess we don't want, again, we want to walk this line between making people too paranoid and just
Right.
making them aware, right? And it gets back
Yeah.
to your trust but verify kind of idea.
Yeah.
Let's talk about ransomware for a few minutes. We hear about this ransomware at big institutions where their computers get locked. Am I wrong? Does that happen more to institutions than individuals, or does it happen to individuals as
Oh,
well?
it happens to individuals as well. Individuals, it's easier to combat that with, and I
Firewalls and things like that.
well, I would also say use an external hard drive and back up your hard drive. You know, and it's easy to back it up 1 hour or on the hour, and so it just backs up the subtle differences that you make. But it's very cheap to get an external hard drive for $90. You get 2 terabytes of information, and you just run your computer always with this as a backup. And then if somebody hacks into your computer and says, I want $10,000, you can say, you want my laptop?
Yeah, here you go. It's a boat anchor now anyway.
That's right.
But you've got all your data, right? So
You
I guess,
have all your data, but corporations can't necessarily do that, because the way that they're hacking into corporations is they are seizing the computers, and so they're not stealing the data. They're just saying we're locking you up until you
They're
pay
just
us.
freezing it, everything. 2 more I wanted to talk about. One is the idea of credit card swipe scamming, and I guess this is one you see where you put in your credit card. You're not tapping, and it's actually someone who's put a device on top of a device, like it's a
Right.
fake scanner, a fake scanner, right? So we've been seeing a little bit of this. It's not email or text. That still goes on, and how do you kind of make yourself aware of that? I guess, again, double check before you insert your card, make sure you trust the people where you're about to do the transaction.
Yeah,
with.
most companies have, financial or payment processing companies have been able to secure a lot of those by having a software to where if the machine is unplugged, it goes back into diagnostics. So you have to actually reboot it from the POS system. But it still
POS
happens.
Is what
The point of sale system.
right?
When
The cash registers.
Yeah,
basically.
so if you're at a grocery store and the big five all have this, if somebody unplugs it and tries to replace the device, the company knows that happened. But if you have a plate that goes over it, then you may not know that. So anytime you're putting a credit card in, it's always good to just wiggle to see if the actual unit moves a little bit, because the gas stations, that's what was happening.
The self-serve gas stations.
The self-serve gas stations, but they've got you can pretty much tell it's still possible to do it.
But it's lower in the risk, I guess.
It's lower in the risk because it's becoming more lucrative to do everything online, and so for the fraudster, it's kind of a dying business.
Right. It's like water. They found an easier way to get at it.
Right.
But the last one I wanted to talk about is less about, I guess, being tricked, but it is in a way. A lot of people like to sell their used products on a Kijiji or an eBay or whatever. And I think there's a lot of risk in that we wanted to tell the people about. It's good to sell and recycle your product, but inviting people to your home to come see product, there's some risk in that. I think I've heard that some police stations have created safe zones where you can go and do that transaction. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, the commodities that you are picking up on some of these sites as well could be stolen. So that's something that you have to be very.
That's something we dealt a lot with, right?
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. And the unfortunate part in retail is that there used to be reselling of product where you would steal a certain amount of merchandise and then try to sell it online. And then what happened is the thieves then posted online what was available, which was pretty much anything in a retail environment. And when they started to get the orders, they would then steal it. And so it was theft.
They'd steal one.
by
Hey,
order.
that's a popular item. Let's go steal more.
Or they would just get the order and somebody would say, I want 3 iPads. And instead of having it in your inventory, the thief didn't need to do that anymore, and they would just go and steal the 3 iPads.
So I guess for our viewers, it's a bit of buyer beware. Mm-hmm. If the price seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
It could be a knockoff, could be fraudulent, a Canada Goose jacket for $100.
Right.
It's not true, right? It's going to be too good to be true. Be careful when you sell your merchandise, because you're inviting basically strangers into your life in some way, shape, or another, kind of with either information or in person. So I guess if we had to kind of sum it all up, what we're really talking about, some kind of key principles. Trust but verify, right? So always contact financial institution, your electricity. If you're wondering if it's real, contact them, right? Is that your kind of one of your best lines of defense, would you say?
Yeah, if you can get past the embarrassment of being scammed, there's a lot of reporting centers. If there's the anti-fraud center in North Bay that if you are out financially and can report it, then you report it there. You can report it to police. There's a reluctance, I know, by consumers because they don't get the kind of reaction by law enforcement just because of the resources, the workload, the lack of prosecution in criminal court.
It is tough to get the money back, right?
It is very difficult to get the money back, and so for law enforcement, they may be reluctant to look at something that's under a certain threshold, whatever that threshold is that they've established. And but it's always good to report, and this is what's been happening in terms of these reports that we are seeing. The 140% increase in attempts is that people are finally starting to report. Now, is that 140% increase in activity or in reporting? And that's the question that remains. And so I would say take it with a grain of salt. Let's let next year be the true tale of what's been going on, but it looks like fraud is on the increase, just because it's a race to the finish in terms of the commercial businesses who are trying to get online and the security protocols that are sometimes lagging. And so there remains a gap between where you want to be in terms of exposing yourself on the internet and in bricks and mortar and everywhere else, and the security precautions that you have the money to invest in.
Yeah, and that people can take. So, Stephen, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a great discussion. And I wanted to tell everyone out there that one of the things, if you're with Moya Financial, you know, you're more than a number. If you have a question about someone, certainly if someone has contacted you from Moya Financial, call us back. Don't be afraid to validate. If you have any question about someone asking you for financial information, call us here. We're very willing and happy to help and you know, be part of your financial security, because really that's what we're here all about, and protect and help the community. So thanks again for tuning in and joining. Hopefully these tips have been useful. Check with your local police departments as well. They've got some great resources on their sites. And hopefully, again, some of these practical tips will help you defend yourself against the fraudsters. And good luck and be safe.